Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Discover Movement Alchemy with the Feldenkrais Method. Activate physical and emotional vitality with awareness through movement. My name is Stephen Dinan. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really delighted to be with you here, partially because I just love learning from Lavinia Plonka, who is our teacher today. She's a body language expert and guild-certified Feldenkrais teacher. She's really been at the forefront of synthesizing new methods of somatic movement work with Feldenkrais that really help to animate our bodies and lives in a whole new way. And we're going to get to explore some new frontiers with her today that I think you're going to really find delightful. So with that said, Lavinia, welcome to today's program.
Thank you, Stephen. As always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Great. I know we're going to dive in today, and you got a lot you want to demonstrate. So I encourage folks to really be ready to open up to doing practices together. I also want to let everyone know right up front that we're going to have a brand new program with Lavinia that's, I think, going to be fantastic. It's all about movement alchemy with the Feldenkrais method. So we'll share more about that towards the end of the hour. So Lavinia, let's start with a little bit of your backstory. I think you have a fascinating backstory that led you to this work, and then we can dive into some of the teachings and practices.
It's always interesting for me to reflect back on the trajectory of my life and to see how circumstances just led me to where I am today. I was always interested in how we express ourselves and in expressing myself. And that led me into a career in the theater as a mime and a clown. And even though I was really good at expressing emotions, I didn't understand why we have those particular expressions, why this is sadness, why this is anger, why we have these particular choices universally. And then the other thing that was going on for me was that I was in a lot of pain. Even though I was athletic and agile, I had this chronic back pain that constantly plagued me. And it wasn't until I discovered the Feldenkrais method where I learned about habitual patterns that we learn in our childhood, that we carry with us through our whole lives, that are the cause of a lot of the interference of our own happiness, that I began to understand a little bit more about how it was actually my own emotional patterns that were contributing to my physical patterns of pain. So I became a Feldenkrais teacher, and that's been a wonderful, wonderful practice for me for over 30 years. But over the course of that time, I also found some other somatic approaches that look at actually how our emotional patterns are manifested in our bodies. One of them is called the ALBA method. Another is called the emotional body. Along with all of that, I've had a continuous spiritual questions, spiritual practice, search, and looking at the relationship of how sacred movement has been part of our tradition for millennia, for forever. Movement has always been part of the sacred. So, here I am now, 30 years later, kind of putting all the pieces together, all of my searches, all of my interests. And so I'm really grateful to the Shift for giving me the opportunity to continue to expand and grow my own research.
So let's talk about the overarching theme today of movement alchemy and the Feldenkrais method, and maybe talk a little bit about how the Feldenkrais method works, and then how you start bringing these other pieces of movement that really help to alchemize different patterns in our body.
Well, first of all, let me just talk a little bit about alchemy, if that's okay, because most people, when we see the word alchemy, we think of, these guys in pointy hats and big pots trying to turn lead into gold back in the Middle Ages. And certainly the alchemists, there's a trajectory that led to our own science of chemistry. But the actual alchemists were not so interested in turning real lead into real gold, as much as they were looking for the gold inside ourselves. In fact, the original translation of alchemy comes from the Chinese, and it's two words that meant gold juice. So it's the juice that moves through us, that is our own potential for transforming our own inner lead into gold. And so it was interesting. I came across a quote from Moshe Feldenkrais at one point where he spoke about the movement that we do as a kind of inner alchemy. So the Feldenkrais method uses movement as it's almost like the retort. You know, if you were a chemist, right? You have your beaker and you have your materials and you put it all together into your experiment. So if my body is my retort, my vessel, I like to think of my body as a sacred vessel that contains all of this possibility. And then I think of movement as the actual material that allows me to become more aware, right? He called this work awareness through movement, not awareness of movement, not movement awareness, but literally that you can develop a finer, clearer awareness of yourself by using movement as your medium. And he developed thousands of movement sequences that allow us to go deep inside our own experience of ourselves so that you can start to unpack your movement habits. I like to say that how you move is how you move through life. You know, there's also another saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So how I walk, how I talk, how I choose to chop the onions, how I drive the car are all related. And by learning these very sophisticated and yet really easy to do movements, one can begin to recognize where unnecessary tensions are, where traumatic memories are held, where compensatory habits due to injuries can be slowly unraveled using movement that is gentle and specific. So it's not like we just say, okay, everybody go ahead and move. You're conducted through a somatic experience of paying attention to whether it's working with your shoulders or your face or your back in very specific ways with the understanding that you are a holistic being. So even if I'm moving my finger, it's influencing my whole body. If you've ever stubbed your toe, you know that one little tiny thing affects everything about what you do. So even though we bring our attention to a part, we're always looking at it in relationship to the whole. The movements are done in a gentle, non-judgmental, safe environment. Many times done lying down. Some of the lessons are done sitting. We even do some things in standing. The idea being the less we have to worry about resisting gravity, the more space we have to pay attention to what's taking place inside of us. So you could say, some people have called the Feldenkrais method movement meditation. Some people have even called it Tai Chi lying down because it's these slow meditative movements, but you're not memorizing a process. You're not trying to fix something. Instead, you're just using the instructions from the teacher or the movement from the practitioner to awaken your own awareness of yourself so that it empowers you to begin to make choices, new choices for how you're going to move, for how you're going to stand, walk, respond to different situations. You know, the more you know about yourself, the more powerful you can be. Moshe Feldenkrais used to say, if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. Most of us move, you know, the way we learned how to move when we were children, and we haven't really improved it since. And it's become part of our motor cortex. It's not even a thought process anymore. So how do I begin to change my habits? How do I begin to find new possibilities, new ways of using myself? It's by breaking it down, by taking my time, by listening to these subtle cues in myself that, you know, can transform you. Even how you use your face can make a difference in the rest of yourself. So that's the Feldenkrais method in a nutshell, and a little bit about kind of the direction that I've gone in.
Fascinating overview. And I'm wondering if you can bring a little bit of discussion of breath and how it relates to the movement and the different patterns and exercises that we're doing.
Sure. Is it okay if I do a demonstration? Sure. We can back up so you can see the whole self, because the breath, of course, is for the whole self, right? So one moment. How you're breathing Now, just your regular breath. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to be correct. It's not like we're trying right now to create a proper breathing pattern, but I want to know what my own natural breathing pattern is. So you may be breathing through your nose, you may be breathing through your mouth, but just take a moment to sense the length of your inhale and the length of your exhale. And the reason I came back here was because I wanted you to sense for yourself how the breath moves through you, right? We inhale through the nose and it kind of travels to the back of the throat, goes down into the lungs. And in a regular breathing pattern, it's often called a diaphragmatic breath. You feel your diaphragm moving down and up. And so just take a moment to sense the length of your inhale and the length of your exhale, just feeling that for a moment. And what we're going to do is just explore how the breath influences us in our posture and our facial expression, and then how our facial expressions can influence our breath. So that you can see that, you know, it's not a chicken or egg thing. They all kind of happen at the same time. So now, as you are breathing, could you just close your eyes for a moment and sense your face? And we don't often think of the muscles in our face, but the muscles in our face are, all of our facial expressions are governed by our seventh cranial nerve that tells us what we should be doing. So just sensing your face in its neutral position right now, sensing your breath, could you begin to imagine, you don't have to do anything, but just imagine that the outside corners of your mouth are moving outward slightly. They're just moving outward, and your face begins to widen. And imagine that the outside corners of your eyes are moving outward. So from a muscular perspective, what's happening is the muscles of your face are abducting away from your nose. And you can just allow your face to widen. And you'll find that it might be growing into a slight smile. As you're feeling this breath, this facial pattern, noticing your breath at the same time. Noticing whether it's the same breath you began with, or whether your breath has changed in some way. And you can open your eyes and just see, can you include having your eyes open, looking at the horizon or at your computer screen, the expression on your face, the quality of your breath. And now, can you take the same muscles of your face and start bringing them inward, having them abduct in towards your nose. So your nose tightens, your eyes tighten, your lips tighten. Notice what happens to your chest when your face tightens. And then just to add a little bit more, could you make your inhale and your exhale exactly the same length, regardless of what it was before, so that you're inhaling and exhaling through your nose with this really tight face, your eyes looking straight ahead. And notice if you feel anything different. And then let go of that and come back to your regular breathing and feel the change. Notice if you now have your own breathing pattern, or maybe you have a new breathing pattern as a result of that. Now, simply let your head come forward a little bit. And with your head forward, just notice, does your face start to change? Do you feel like smiling with your head forward?
Or do you feel like you're concentrating, reaching towards something? Does that change your breath again? Maybe squint your eyes a little bit again. And then come back. Find your neutral stance. And then pull your head backward. Notice what your eyes immediately want to do when you pull your head backward. Notice what happens to your breath. You might find that breathing through your nose is not very comfortable at all, and you have to open your mouth a little bit. Some people live here in this pattern. Some of us live in this pattern, right? So we find these, and everybody let that go. Just let that go. So the exploration of these postural patterns is a way that you can begin to understand how your breath, your posture, your face are all connected all the time. And that process of developing an understanding can really change how you are. Now, what happens with a lot of us is that we feel stuck. We feel stuck in our postures. And one way to explore that is not by trying to fix it or change it. For a good portion of my life, and one of the reasons that I had so much back pain was because I was walking around with a lot of repressed anger from things from my childhood, who knows what, but it worked into this kind of tension in my back because I was always literally holding myself back. And it wasn't through trying to be smiley or cheerful or friendly that helped me change. It was learning how to be more compassionate with myself, more flexible. So I wanted to offer just a small Feldenkrais version of movement that can maybe help us with our posture and give us more possibility. So maybe take a moment right now to just notice your own posture, how you're sitting now without correcting yourself again, just feeling whether it feels comfortable, whether it feels easy. Do a few small check-ins. What's it like to turn and look around yourself? What's the depth of your breath right now? How does your head and neck feel? And one way that, sometimes we look at Feldenkrais lessons as acts of self-compassion because I'm taking the time to study myself. I'm taking the time to take care of myself. And I'm only moving as much as feels safe, easy, and right for me. So I thought that we could explore a little bit of a sequence that Feldenkrais actually called it learning how to love yourself. You could call it an act of self-compassion. And we're going to use our own hand to bring that process to a place of greater clarity and touch. So whichever hand you want, could you just bring that hand now to touch your face? We don't often touch our face unless we're putting on makeup or squeezing a blackhead or, we don't actually sense. And as I'm sensing my face with my hand, the first question that comes up is my hand sensing my face? Is my face sensing my hand? Just being kind to how you're touching yourself, and then allow your hand to cross over to the other side. Feel how now I'm connecting right and left brain as I'm touching these parts of myself. Noticing what does my neck feel like? How do I get to know myself? This sounds so elementary, and yet it's so essential. Do I really know how I feel? And now I'd like you to just take that a little bit further, and you're going to think about how you can allow this movement of compassion to increase your flexibility. I'd like you to take that same hand and just begin sliding it down the outside of the same leg. So if you've chosen your left arm, you're doing your left hand. If you've chosen your right arm, you're doing your right hand. And as you're doing this movement, could you begin to ask yourself, what is the rest of me doing? For example, are you still looking up or are you looking down at your hand? If you're looking down at your hand, what is your neck doing? As you come up, do you come back on top of your skeleton or are you still looking down? What would happen if you lowered your head and rounded your back as you went down? Would that change how you reach? And as you come back up, feeling that uncurling in your spine. What about your breath? As you go down, could you exhale, right? As I exhale, my diaphragm goes back up into my ribs. My ribs can soften, my back rounds. You might only get a little bit down. Don't force yourself to try to come all the way down. And then pause a moment and rest. We rest a lot in our movement sequences, not just because you're fatigued from paying attention, but also to give your system time to process that information. Try the same thing with your other hand. Just kind of going down the outside of your leg and coming back up. Try that several times and play for a moment with how you use your head, where you direct your eyes. Sense your face. Are you tightening your face? Are you widening your face? Does your face feel absolutely neutral? What is your connection to your breath? Sensing how you breathe can make a difference in how you move through life. You know, lots of times people tell me, I forget to breathe. And, you know, I know that you're probably doing okay because you actually showed up for class, and so that means you must be breathing. But becoming aware of your habitual breathing patterns can tell you something about how you're using the rest of yourself. So it's not that holding your breath is wrong, but holding your breath can interfere. Try reaching down to that side, but hold your breath. And notice the difference in the quality of the movement and in how it feels. And then pause again. Now, could you, using the outside of your hand, and by the way, the outside, the back of your hand, if you just touch the back of your hand, you can feel how different it is than the front of your hand, right? If you touch your face with the back of your hand, the experience is different, physically and emotionally. And we even have expressions like the back of my hand to you. But, you know, when I'm tired versus I'm tired, these expressions and how we use the two sides of our hand are very important. So taking the back of your hand now, slide it down the inside of the first leg and notice how you do that. There's a number of different ways you can do that. For example, you could still be just looking down. Notice what that does to your spine. Can you imagine what your spine is doing as you look down and bend down? Now, what would happen if you let yourself turn to look over your opposite shoulder as you go down? Now you're adding a level of complexity to your move. What do you have to do in order to do that? We all know how to do that. What exactly is happening? There's this wonderful twist happening in the upper thoracic spine. And this is a movement that we do often. I go to pick something up and somebody calls my name, right? And yet I don't think about it. Here I have an opportunity to feel my breath as I go down and up. Try it with your other arm and feel the difference. Feel how this side bends differently than the other side, which tells us something about our right and left dominance and how we use ourselves. So try looking straight down, feeling how your back rounds. Try turning and feeling twist happens. Try doing it while holding your breath and see the difference. So I keep talking about the breath and the face and the movement. So now we'll kind of put those little pieces together. So even though you're still acting compassionately with your hand, could you take a moment, come back to this place of just sitting, and think once again about tightening the muscles of your face inward. Tightening, tensing. Notice what that does to your shoulders. And now go back to the original movement of sliding your hand down the side and feel, what's it like with a tight face? You can force it to go, but something has changed, hasn't it? You can try the other side to see maybe the other side does it better. Notice how this has influenced your breath. And now widen your face and try the same movement, reaching down, coming up, noticing your breath as you reach down and come up. So you can see that when we have unconscious tension in our face, it affects the muscles of the spine. It affects how I move through life. And, you know, we have all kinds of different patterns that we use in our body and in our face to express our emotions. So this is just to have a little bit of a taste of that as we go. So now go back to some of the things that you did in the very beginning, just kind of checking out what's it like to turn now and look around you. And even though you've done hardly anything at all, notice if maybe the range has changed a little bit. Maybe how you bend and reach something has changed a little bit. So when you practice these movements and add this ineffable quality of attention or awareness, as Feldenkrais called it, you begin to start to create chemical changes, neurological changes in yourself. And that process can continue for a lifetime. So I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration. And if we need more later, I'll do more later.
Well, that was great, Lavinia. That was what I noticed actually was I hadn't really been aware of how facial tension sort of like amplifies through other parts of the body. And also just I noticed my tendency to want to kind of like fix something like, oh, there's a tension point, and I'll want to kind of stretch it out versus just be present with it and sort of move with that. And then at the end, it was interesting. I had like a kink in my neck that sort of released sort of without stretching it. It was more, I think, with what you're doing with the breath and the face and the movement that just kind of like relaxed back in, something that was like going on right there. So really interesting to sort of like, instead of like, we're so trained to kind of work at like, oh, I'm going to stretch that out, the fix it impulse versus like coming more from the inside and letting it open to a different pattern.
It's interesting what you said. You know, Feldenkrais had a saying. He used to say, to correct is incorrect. Because when I am trying to correct one thing, I'm not really connecting to all of the other factors that might be contributing to this problem. You know, the crick in the neck might be the result of the way you're holding your opposite hip, or it could be the result of something taking place in the jaw. And even when I'm speaking in this way, it's sounding very linear because you are a system, and the system is responding instantaneously. It's like, you remember instant messaging from AOL? It's like instant messages coming through you all the time through that neurochemical response that we have. So, secret ingredient, the alchemical elixir of life, is bringing this awareness to what I do. And by paying attention, the system begins to correct itself. So by allowing yourself to explore, you know, the other thing is that you are exploring perhaps movements and patterns that are not necessarily habitual or familiar, right? We interrupt the habitual pattern, explore new patterns, use repetition with variation in order to understand what's taking place in that pattern. And then we allow the nervous system to reset itself instead of trying to fix it. Because if I keep, you know, and we know this, we know if we try to fix something, it just goes back to what it was anyway. The process is about retraining the brain in order to choose the more functional way of moving. So I appreciate what you said about, suddenly feeling a difference in the crick in your neck.
Fascinating. Well, I think it's such a deep paradigm shift in how we relate to our bodies. And you'd mentioned before about just how originally you saw why we had different emotions were connected to different postures. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about how each emotion also has a breath signature as well. And so maybe how we can kind of open up some of our range of motions with becoming more aware of that.
Right. Well, if you look at what in the emotional body, we speak about emotional effector patterns, and I showed you very basic versions of some of them. There are 6 basic emotions in this particular system. There are many, many different systems that explore body language in different ways, and so I bow to all of them. I researched a lot of them. But when I'm looking at specific breath patterns, I'm speaking about these emotional effector patterns. And there are nose breathing patterns, there are mouth breathing patterns, and there are nose and mouth breathing patterns. And there are what I call tension patterns and relaxation patterns. So, for example, when you had that smile and you were just allowing that breathing through your nose, inhaling through your nose, exhaling through your nose, allowing that to be as long or as luxurious as you want it to be. That is part of a pattern that some people call tenderness, some people call compassion. It depends on how you use it, but it's a soft, relaxing pattern versus when you tightened your face and tightened your nose and begin to feel that inhale, exhale tightly coming through the nose. It takes us towards what some people would call an anger pattern. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you're focused and concentrated and you're breathing through your nose that you're angry. You could be literally concentrating or frustrated or going into courage, which would be a mix, all of those mixes of that particular breathing pattern. When you brought your head back and widened your eyes, that brings another kind of breathing pattern. That's a mouth breathing pattern, right? When we're frightened and we retreat, we pull the air in and we want to hold the air in. That's a tension pattern. Versus when we're laughing, which is also it's a nose breathing pattern, nose and mouth breathing pattern where I'm letting it all go. It all comes out. So with each of these, we have our breathing pattern, whether it's nose, mouth, or through the nose. And it's a process of learning to go through all that. So, but we connect that, I connect that with different Feldenkrais lessons as well to help us more clearly embody what we're exploring, breaking it down even more. It's not like you just say, okay, now breathe this way. It doesn't work. There's many, I studied acting for years and they would say, breathe this way or act this way. It doesn't happen in an organic way. You have to master the skill. Just like you learn how to ride a bicycle or drive a car, you break it down and start to understand what's really taking place inside of you. So, those breath patterns connect up to our postural patterns. One really popular postural pattern that has been talked about endlessly, at least in my world, is this idea of the power pose. Have you heard about this, Stephen?
Not really. So I'd love to hear more.
Oh, okay, good. So there was a study done several years ago. A scientist named Amy Cuddy had all of these different university students taking different power poses and then supposedly measuring their neurochemical response as a result of it. And, there's been all kinds of studies back and forth. There's been over 70 studies since then about whether power posing itself can actually change your neural chemistry. What it has been shown to do is it has been shown to help people feel more powerful, not in the moment of a situation, but if they do it before. So an example of a power pose, I'm going to stand up again just for a moment. An example of a standing power pose would be like the Jolly Green Giant. You know, I'm standing like this, but you would never walk into a board meeting like this because you would alienate people. But to take a moment here and right away, you're connecting to your whole body, whether it's my feet are connected to the floor. I feel my groundedness, my pelvis, my first and second chakra, all connected here. I'm even giving information to myself with my hands on my hips. Little side note, there was a teacher of oratory and body language in the 1800s, who spoke about hands on the hips being self-referential. I am referring to my power center. So we've known about this kind of stuff for hundreds of years intuitively, maybe thousands of years. It's written about in ancient Indian texts as well. When I'm standing like this, I can engage in that deep diaphragmatic breathing, feeling the whole thing filling me up. Now, this does not have to be the only power pose in the world. You can choose your power pose. There's a show on TV in the United States called Ted Lasso, and there's a character in the show who is already, she's very, very tall, but she's periodically intimidated. And when she has to go to do a meeting or whatever, she does her own power pose, making herself as big as she possibly can and roaring in order to create that neurochemical response of power within herself. In Moshe Feldenkrais's trainings, he actually has some movements that we do. For example, sorry, I get up and down and up and down, where we spend time connecting to the floor in the same way and working with the pelvis moving backwards and forward, feeling the whole center of the self, taking a breath in and allowing that whole power to come out of us. Again, I'm not going to walk into a confrontation or a meeting or an audition and do that in front of people. But if I do it a few minutes before, I actually begin to feel more courageous, more powerful. So again, it's using the innate qualities of our structure, of our own nervous system, of our own neurochemical intelligence to do what we want. So I hope that answered that question.
That was great. It's really interesting to think about also doing poses to kind of reconnect with that intelligence before you go into something too. So, you know, that's a really interesting. It's like you're kind of training your nervous system and body to open up to a certain pattern before you enter in, and that's quite cool.
Yeah, I think it's not just a pattern. And of course, I have no evidence-based research to prove this, but I do think that when we engage in these almost animal-like patterns, that they trigger certain neurochemicals, right? Our neurons are constantly sending information to get the norepinephrine and the dopamine going and to get everything going. And when we engage in some of these postures or attitudes, in a functional way, then we're able to actually trigger enough chemistry that I can walk into that meeting and not be scared or whatever situation I'm in.
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. So I wanted to circle back with, we talked about, like, we were doing the demonstration, certain areas of our body opening up, not as a result of trying to fix them or stretch them, but like just as a kind of an unwinding of a deeper awareness pattern. Maybe share a little bit about how this kind of work can increase flexibility, which a lot of people want for different reasons, without actually trying to do the fix-it moves.
So, not to get technical again, but when we stretch our muscles, the muscles actually then immediately want to go back, just like a rubber band. Right? Our muscles are in that way, they're elastic, but they have a tendency to want to go back. So, when we stretch ourselves, we're not necessarily increasing our flexibility. So that is number one. In the Feldenkrais method, the approach to flexibility is how to make the relationship between flexing and extending more organized, more connected, so that I know that when I'm going to flex in this way, that the muscles in the front of myself can let go a little bit, the muscles in the back can widen, or if I'm needing to use my belly, that I know how to pull the belly in. When I want to arch my back and expand, that these muscles here in the front can widen and relax, and the muscles in the back can do the work. So in other words, if you wanted to be more flexible, say to be able to touch your toes, you wouldn't get more flexible by continuing to try to touch your toes. You would work with ways of softening the spine, increasing the clarity of how you breathe and use your belly, using your legs to flex and extend, and through the process of your nervous system and body learning a better distribution of effort, or as Feldenkrais put it, a more effective distribution of what he called tonus, you have the result of flexibility without having to stretch. He spoke often about the fact that we all have a certain amount of what he called tonus, but we have it in all the wrong, too much in some places, not enough in other places. So there's tension up in the shoulder girdle, but then the belly is lax. Or there's tightness in the butt, but then the chest is slumped. And so the distribution of tonus is not even. So when we do this work, the system begins to find the appropriate distribution of effort through the entire skeleton. It allows us to feel more balanced, because now instead of having one shoulder up or one hip slightly up, everything comes back into place. And that was an exaggeration. Most of us don't walk around like that, but we have maybe a slight lift in one shoulder or a slight lift in the hip or a slight rotation here. That takes us off of our center. When I'm off my center, my choices are limited. As I use this work to untangle what my habits are, I begin to have more options, more possibilities for how I can move, and so therefore how I can move through my life. So flexibility is the result of the proper distribution of my work, of my tonus, of my use of self, instead of stretching. When we stretch, we also have a tendency to want to strive, to strain. And I mean, I have nothing against striving. If you're striving for a goal, or you're trying to get the ball in the basket, or you're trying to, you're on stage and you have to do a specific performance with your violin. But when I'm practicing for myself to let go of striving and see if I can instead be curious. How do I do this? How could I do it more easily? How can I let go of trying to force something? And through that process, you might discover something new, which is what it's all about. It's about discovering something new about yourself.
Well, Lavinia, there's just so much brilliance in what you're sharing, and it really just keeps popping little recognitions and openings and new ways really of relating to our whole embodied self. And so I'm super excited that this isn't the end of the journey, that people can go further with you. So I want to spend some time talking about that. Lavinia has agreed to teach a brand new program for us. It's called Movement Alchemy with the Feldenkrais Method. Activate physical and emotional vitality with awareness through movement. You can see this program laid out in detail at feldenkrais.course.com, and Feldenkrais is Feldenkrais, feldenkrais-methodcourse.com. So you don't need to have experience with the Feldenkrais method. As you've seen today, Lavinia just has a way of really distilling the essential teachings and practices and transmissions in a way that you can really access at whatever level of your own somatic exploration you've done. And you can really get some of the most profound benefits when you just embark on this path as well. So, Lavinia, I'd love for you to share in your own words, so really the bigger why of taking the program, and then I'll read out the module titles, and you can give us a preview of what's coming in each.
Well, of course, my aim is nothing less than transformation itself. I'm very ambitious all the time. But I wanted to offer an opportunity for people to experience the physical improvement that you can have through doing this work. Also, the mental clarity that can result because of the fact that you are more clear about how you move. Emotional freedom by understanding more about how your breath and your postures influence how you express yourself emotionally, developing what I like to call emotional resilience or emotional fluency by being less reactive and more able to respond to situations. So mental, physical, emotional, and, then bringing in these other qualities or ideas that are talked about, like our alchemical selves, our energetic selves, our creative selves, and how those parts of us are part of this experience of the whole person. To me, it's not just about the body. It's about the whole self, using movement as my vehicle, as my way in to understanding myself better. So in the 7 classes that we're doing, we're going to go deeply in movement lessons. Every class will have a movement lesson with a theme that allows us to go more deeply into this possibility of inner alchemy.
So module 1 is called Strategies for Regaining Suppleness and Support in Your Back so you can move with pleasure.
So just as I was saying earlier, the idea of distribution of effort and, of course, the relaxation of tension. So I'll be talking about back pain, some of the causes of back pain, and then how we can use a particular Feldenkrais awareness through movement lesson to allow the back to soften and find another organization that could relieve, especially lower back pain, although a lot of times people will feel relief even in the thoracic area and their ribs when they do this, the first lesson of this series.
Module 2, use your breath to reduce the tension in your muscles and sleep better.
Oh, that's a good one. We're going to be literally exploring our breath from the inside out, looking at the relationship of the movement of our lungs and our diaphragm to calming the nervous system, right? When I actually am able to sense my breath and control the inhale and exhale and find the relationship between the movement of my breath and the movement of my ribs, you're going to find that your carbon dioxide and oxygen relationship will change in order to feel more relaxed, so that you're breathing deeper, but with less effort, and that will help you, I hope, relax and sleep.
Module 3, recover a sense of safety and develop emotional resilience by becoming more flexible.
So in there, we're going to be looking at that whole relationship of flexion, extension, softening, and connecting it to a couple of the actual emotional effector patterns.
Module 4, find your inner authority to create new freedom in your life.
We have this midline. You could say this is my support system. When I'm connected to the center of myself, knowing where I am in my center, not right, not left, not right, not left, not there, just here, present, centered, grounded, then I can feel my own agency. And from there, I develop choice. So that lesson is going to be really looking at finding that center and then using that center to be able to move through life by my choice.
Module 5, liberate the power of your pelvis for increased self-confidence and improved posture.
I feel like that one explains itself, but yes, we will be exploring the potential, the importance of the ability to have freedom of movement in the pelvis, right? The pelvis has sort of 6 cardinal directions, and all of those directions affect your spine, your hips. So your ability to be able to move forward in life, your ability to be able to respond, connecting to your power centers, your dantian, your first and second chakras. How does all of that connect to your ability to stand your ground and do what you want to do?
Module 6, move your spine like the ocean to unlock hidden tensions and latent grace.
I love this lesson because it's, we forget that we're 75% water. We have this perception of ourselves as solid. And this lesson brings that quality of flow and reminds us kind of our watery nature in a way that also will help increase flexibility, because when I soften, I become more flexible, I become more resilient, I become more able to move through life in a responsive and not reactive way. So as you can see, as we're going through the sequence, we're building, we're getting more sophisticated with the movements, but then harking back to some of the things that you already learned so that you can see how you can actually move more freely. I wouldn't have started with that because it's already taking us into a direction that allows us to go deeper into ourselves and freer.
And finally, Module 7, create your talisman for the future to turn your personal lead into gold.
I just always think it's important whenever you've had any kind of a course or a series to be able to have something tangible that will remind you of that course. So we'll be creating that through movement as well as through meditation and through an artistic process. So it will be bringing all of the physical, mental, emotional, and creative bodies together.
Well, what an awesome offering this is. And I know what a delightful teacher you are when you really create such an empowering environment for people to learn and explore, and you really model what you teach. So people are in for a treat. So again, you can find the whole program laid out in detail at feldenkrais.com, feldenkrais.com. So in addition to the 7 live modules you're going to get with Lavinia, they're going to do interactive exercises, ask your questions directly. You'll get recordings, both video and audio, of every session. You'll have word-for-word transcripts so you can work with, study, and highlight as well. There's weekly exercises for home to really take these practices and make them your own. There's a Facebook community to support your journey and build community really across the world, as well as small group time to connect with other participants. On the page at Feldenkrais Method Course as well, you'll see a couple extra bonuses that we haven't mentioned yet. There's an audio lesson with Lavinia called Oscillation, the Key to Relaxation. That's kind of intriguing. You want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's actually sort of a Feldenkrais method classic. It's using your feet to learn how to vibrate through your whole self. If you think about your feet as, every time they hit the ground, there's a vibration that's moving all the way up through your head. And that's how we're conducting information about what the world underneath me is like. This one's done lying down, but it's an opportunity to feel how that oscillation can let your bones literally move through you, and through that process, relax the whole of yourself. I love that lesson.
That's great. There's also another whole full audio program with Lavinia called The Art of Letting Go, Learn to Relieve Your TMJ. That's pretty specific. Love to have you share a little about that.
Well, it's specific because so many people have either, come to me asking for a TMJ program, or have come to me to work one-on-one because of TMJ. And TMJ has so many different causes. Again, we can't just look at just the mouth, right? As I said, it's the whole body. So what I did was I created an audio program that's a series of short lessons that explore the relationship of the mouth and the jaw to all the different parts of the self. And it's a very relaxing program, and it's very effective. I can speak for myself because one of the things that was locked up in me when I began this work was my jaw. So I really am very proud of this particular product.
In addition, if you look at the page, there's an additional bonus that we haven't mentioned yet that you get when you sign up by midnight tonight. And this is our way to encourage you to really tune in now while you're connecting with the practices and with Lavinia's teaching. And if you have the nudge from inside to move forward, then you've got an extra bonus for doing so. This is a full 243-page PDF digital book. It's called You've Got the Power: 4 Paths to Awaken Your Body's Archetypal Energies. Let's share about that special bonus, Lavinia.
Well, first of all, I have to give credit to you, Stephen, because you were the one who encouraged me to write the book. And it was also the result of a course I taught at the Shift, looking at these 4 cardinal archetypes, these meta archetypes, the warrior, the teacher, the healer, and the visionary, and how we all have the potential to embody these. So the book uses movement explorations, stories from my life and my relationship to these 4 archetypes, as well as a lot of meditation exercises to help bring us to that place of our own personal power, the power to be able to be the teacher, the healer, the warrior, and the visionary in our lives, no matter what we do. And it's a really fun read.
Fantastic. That's a great extra reason to sign up by midnight tonight, Pacific time. So this is a really amazing program. We've kept the investment very accessible. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you can save 10% when you pay in full up front with 1 payment of $349. The course is going to start on July 20th and run Thursdays at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. But even if you can't make those live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings, engagement with other classmates, and really the practices as well, because this is all about doing the practices and experiencing the benefits from that. So on the page, you'll also see, which is Feldenkrais method course again. You'll also see quite a number of testimonials from previous students and graduates from Lavinia's programs at Shift. She gets great feedback. People love working with her. She has a really profound way of teaching. It's empowering and also fun as well, which is nice to have her playfulness enter in as well. So you're really in for a treat. You're in great hands to explore the Feldenkrais method and its ability to really open whole new patterns of freedom and embodiment for you, and to clear and open emotions and free yourself from painful patterns in your body. There's a lot of benefit from doing this work. So again, you can find all the details at feldenkrais-methodcourse.com, feldenkrais-methodcourse.com, and you get that special bonus, the full 243-page ebook, when you sign up by midnight tonight. So Lavinia, we're at the end of our time together. Really juicy hour. Thank you for your wisdom and embodied teaching. And anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering going further on this journey of movement alchemy with you?
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about this quote from Moshe Feldenkrais that stays with me even after all these many years. And that's that he said that his aim was to help people realize their avowed and unavowed dreams, that this method can help restore our human dignity. And I just think that quote just so encompasses everything that I love about this work. It's not just about moving better. It's about living better. So I hope that people take advantage of this.
It's all about living better. So thank you for being a radiant example of that living better, and for helping all of us free ourselves from patterns that just are, old grooves that no longer serve. So thank you so much for this work and for your beautiful teaching today. So thank you all for joining. Many blessings to you. And if you'd like to go further with Lavinia, you're warmly welcome to do so. And that program is Movement Alchemy with the Feldenkrais Method. Activate physical and emotional vitality with awareness through movement. You can get all the details at feldenkrais-methodcourse.com, and you get the special bonus of the You've Got the Power digital book when you sign up by midnight tonight. So thank you all, and thank you, Lavinia.